Wow. What exactly just happened in Russia? That's what a lot of people are wondering. As we can see on Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere, it seems to be the top news story because it is a very, very big event. So what just happened? Well, I woke up at 5 a.m. today, and when I saw what was happening, I jumped to my computer and glued myself in front of it for the next 7 hours and saw everything as it was unfurling. So what do I think happened? As the events were unfurling, I did take notes, and I corrected myself several times, and I tried to, read and be as accurate as possible with these notes. And these are the notes that I'm going to be reading to you guys. These are the notes that I'll be trying to explain to you guys as to what I think just happened with this Russian coup. Now, I don't speak Russian, and I'll try to do my best. And I think that this is pretty accurate, but obviously it's not going to be entirely accurate. Some of it is speculative, but I think most of this can actually be verified by looking things up. So where do we begin? Well, Prigozhin, this guy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was feuding a lot with Minister of Defense Shoigu. I'm going to call him Shoigu. Anyway, Prigozhin and Shoigu were feuding. Now, Vladimir Putin allowed Prigozhin to operate as a private military company that Vladimir Putin could use effectively as his arm. To my knowledge, these two got, at the very least, they didn't hate each other, and Prigozhin often did Vladimir Putin's bidding. However, because of how Vladimir Putin does things, he kind of pit these people against each other. Now, Ministry of Defense Shoigu considered Prigozhin to be a very large threat to him. So that's where this begins, okay? Now, for the last 2 months, it appears that the Wagner Group, that is the private military company of Prigozhin, it appears the Wagner Group was lying about an ammunition shortage. And they seem to have been lying about this in order to stockpile ammunition. The coup to many people appears to have been planned. It seems to have occurred in desperation because of things I'll get into in a bit, but it appears to have been planned. People don't seem to have opposed Prigozhin as much as you would assume people would oppose someone attempting a coup. Nobody seemed to support him, but nobody seemed to be staunchly against him. The military didn't move that harshly against him. No one really seemed to move that harshly against him. Many of the governors of the regions, although not opposing him, just sort of let him do whatever he wanted. So it does appear that the coup was being planned, and that's why they were stockpiling ammunition. Russian investigators, and particularly the Ministry of Defense, seem to have caught on to his attempted coup. Now, we don't particularly know why he was doing this, but it is to be assumed because they were trying to disband the Wagner Group. The Russian Defense Ministry demanded he place his troops under their command. So the Ministry of Defense, and I will back that up right here because there's a few things that I think should be backed up because they're pretty important. This month, he defied orders to sign a contract placing his troops under Defense Ministry command. So let's talk about Prigozhin. Prigozhin was asked by the Defense Ministry to take the troops, his private military company, out of his command and put them under their command, so he would have no more troops. He refused to do that, and instead, 2 days ago, denounced the upper echelon of the Russian military, called the special military operation a war, denounced how it was being held, called it unlawful, blah, blah, blah. Then yesterday, today still for me, but yesterday, he then launched his coup. So Prigozhin demanded Shoigu was removed from power, and he took the Rostov Oblast. Now, I'm actually gonna pull up a Google map here because this might help some of you guys understand this. I've been looking at this for a while, so yeah. So if we look at a world map here, this is the Rostov Oblast. Okay, so here's Ukraine over here. You guys can see that. That's Ukraine, and this is the Rostov Oblast. So he pulled his troops out of Ukraine. They've been pulled out for a while, but he took the Rostov Oblast. Now that's primarily where a lot of the Russian troops have been getting supplies. So when he took this oblast without firing a shot, he had large control over Russian supplies. He took this, and a lot of people thought to themselves, oh, damn, because it was kind of shocking that a Russian general managed to defect Even though he wasn't a general of the Russian army, he managed to defect and take the Rostov Oblast. Then, somewhere around 1 a.m., but the exact time is unconfirmed, I'll say this right here. He announced his intent to remove the Prime Minister of Defense Shigoi and then also Vladimir Putin from power. So he was going to remove both Shigoi and Vladimir Putin. He then began to march his private army to Moscow. Now, as you can see here, there's a road from Rostov, and if you zoom in here, you can follow this road. This road, this orange thing here, goes all the way up to Moscow. Now, this is a long road. This is a very long road. I'm pretty sure that this road is longer than Paris to Berlin. So in the span of a day, he tried to march all the way from Rostov to Moscow. That is a long distance. I'd be like trying to go again from like Paris into like, it's longer than Berlin. It'd be like from Paris to Poznan. It's a long distance. In fact, I think I'm still underselling it. So he tried to do this seemingly in desperation. That's my take on it. I think he tried to do it in a desperate move. Why? Because I think the Ministry of Defense was onto him. I think for once the Russian intelligence actually was doing a very good job, understood that a coup was happening, tried to disarm the coup, and him, in a desperate move, somehow managed to get the Rostov Oblast under his control and then marched on Moscow. Now this is when this gets interesting, if you want to look at it that way. Effectively, Moscow was completely blindsided. It doesn't seem that anyone truly thought that he was capable of this. It doesn't seem that anyone thought that he could pull this off. And yet he did. Very quickly, we saw that Wagnerite troops, they call them Wagnerite, but it sounds weird to say, Wagnerite troops were in Voronezh. Very quickly, within 5 or so hours, his troops were already halfway to Moscow. Now, it took them a long time after that due to issues, but within 5 hours, he's already halfway to Moscow. That gave Moscow, based on how quickly his troops are heading, they thought they had like 5 hours before Moscow was about to be taken by a random general who defected. This was shocking. They had no defense against this. There was nothing. They were tearing apart roads. They were trying to mine things. They were calling out the police force. They were trying to ship in the National Guard. They were calling in the Chechens. It very much appeared to be an extremely desperate defense of Moscow, as they were completely and totally blindsided that he would try this. Russian air forces began mass attacks against the Wagner group, targeting their convoys and oil reserves. It appears that the Russian Air Force, seemingly to be competent this time around, actually did manage to strike several oil reserves. They did manage to strike the convoy. The Wagner group argues that I think they said they took down 5 to 11 helicopters. They did change their story a few times. So they proclaimed that they took down 5 to 11 helicopters. Me personally, I didn't see any footage of that. I saw several misses. But I'm sure they, if they were shooting at them that much, maybe they did manage to take them down. I don't know. The fighting was primarily limited to airstrikes as the Wagner group made rapid progress towards Moscow. Now remember, Rostov was taken without a shot. Several military commanders along the way just stepped aside or didn't try to really do anything. The governors of the regions didn't do anything. Effectively, with very seemingly almost no fighting, he was well on his way to Moscow. Does everyone follow along with this, right? Okay. Fighting between the Wagner group and Kremlin loyalists breaks out in the Voronezh region. Now, I don't know if this one can be totally confirmed. It does appear at some point that there was gunfire. At the very least, I saw lots of videos of this. So as he moved from Rostov down here and he moved up to Voronezh up here, it does appear that at some point he did meet resistance, but seemingly not that much, okay? But it does appear that there was fighting. Now, I'm saying this for anyone who thinks this coup is fake. After it ended, my first thoughts were, was this fake? And I went back and I reviewed a lot of the footage, which I'm not going to show here, but I did review a lot of the footage there very much does seem to be, the footage isn't great, but a lot of footage you look into is not going to be great anyway. They're not going to have perfect footage of you shooting at people, right? There's lots of explosions, lots of gunfire. Both sides were setting up roadblocks. Both sides were setting up offensive and defensive moves. Okay, so for the perspective of, do you think this is fake? I don't think this is fake. And when I wrote this down, I decided to keep it because it did seem through live leaks, through video footage, through things like that, that yes, there was small skirmishes, that this wasn't just some fake thing. At this point, Putin asked Kazakhstan and Belarus for military aid. Both countries actually denied him. Now, that's something that a lot of people don't understand. While some countries denounced the coup, obviously, some countries denounced it. Iran denounced it. Turkey denounced it. No one actually offered aid to Moscow. It did appear to many people at this time, with the Wagnerites already halfway to Russia. And you'll notice I keep saying halfway because it does appear, as I go through this, it does appear that they sort of propagandized how quickly they made progress. Very quickly, they said they were in Varaz, and then like 5 hours later, they were still in Voronezh. Now I understand logistics and things like that can make it hard to move your entire 25,000 man army. And it was only a 25,000 man coup, by the way. There were 20,000 reservists they could have called up, but that still would have been a mere 45,000 if every single one of them were called up. So in other words, it would not have been very large. Okay. So it does seem that propaganda and other stuff did make it seem that they were making very, 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 very rapid progress very quickly. But as they needed to have the entire army catch up to them, they were quickly slowed down as well. At either rate, none of Putin's allies came to his defense. Now, this one seems to be a bit of a dispute. Some people believe it, some people don't. But government planes were ID'd fleeing from Moscow. Dmitry Medvedev, the Security Council of Russia, fled Moscow. I don't know if that's 100% confirmed. It was at the time, as I wrote this, it was unknown if Putin left. People assumed Putin was still there. To my knowledge, it was never actually confirmed if Putin was still there. And as I watched through all these, I watched for a long, long, long time. Putin did not show up on the air that much. He seemed to, I'm not going to say he seemed to be in hiding, but he seemed to kind of be either extremely pissed off to the point of ridiculousness or kind of shitting his pants. At either rate, it didn't seem like Putin was making very many televised appearances. And considering how badly the Ukrainians were making fun of him, you'd think he would want to have done that to, even if he faked it, you'd think he'd have wanted done that to kind of dispel the rumors about it. Okay, so there was then a defensive line was being set up 50 kilometers below Moscow by Kremlin loyalists. The progress was slow, and many were critiquing it as not fast enough. No actual fighting forces were deployed, though. Most were police. So at this point, Moscow started to set up a defensive line here. So we can see, if you look at the map here, with the majority of the forces here and Moscow Defense Forces here. Now, there were some reported traffic jams here. So I think the spearhead of the coup did manage to reach at least to about this area. And they would likely, if they were cruising full ahead, they would likely have made it that far, because I actually was running estimates on how far you could make it at kilometers per hour. But the main fighting force seems to have still been locked behind in Voronezh. Okay. Wagner started to actually deploy their tracked vehicles, their tanks. Wagner at this point claimed to have shot down at least 4 helicopters. A Russian plane was taken down, but it was unconfirmed if Wagner wanted to take credit for that. So normally tracked vehicles, things like tanks, would be deployed on trucks and then moved, but the tanks were actually deployed, and they weren't all on trucks. Many were being moved just by driving themselves. So at this point, it very much did seem that the Wagner group was deployed and that they very much were going to go into combat using armor and things like that. So I wrote this down and I kept this here because at the time, these were my thoughts. And I think that's pretty important, was that we did see those tanks moving in. This wasn't just some soldiers, but the tanks were moving in, and they were moving across roadblocks and things like that. The Chechen soldiers moved to the Rostov region to reclaim the supply depots. So I think that part is important as well, because the Chechens moved in to try to reclaim Rostov. Putin called up the Chechens who were down here in Grozny, I believe. And that was because Rostov controlled all the supply depots. And I'm just saying this, I left this in once again to try to disprove or quelch, let's say, the rumors that this was fake, that this was happening. All of the actions taken by Putin, tearing up the roads, airstrikes onto the Wagner group and their oil reserves and things like that, the Chechens being called up to try to take Rostov, all of this would lead you to believe that Putin was very afraid of this and was very much doing what he could to stop it. This wasn't just the Wagner's move on Moscow and then are defeated. It very much seemed that Putin was deploying all measures he could to stop this. And at the time, it did not seem that what he was doing was adequate. A lot of people noticed that. It did not seem that he was adequate. He was trying to deploy police, some of whom were still using handguns, many of whom were still using handguns to try to stop the Wagner group, which would have ended not well. At this point, and I left this in here, Putin was finally reported to, but it was never confirmed 100% to have left Moscow. Once again, at this point, as the coup was starting to reach an end, it did appear that Putin had left Moscow, but it wasn't confirmed. No one had seen him out of Moscow. But the thing was, no one was seeing him in Moscow. No one had seen him in for a while. And there were, let's say, a lot of reasons to suspect that he had fled Moscow. Not confirmed, though. I'm just going to leave that in there. Not 100% confirmed. At this point, Wagner forces appeared to be closing in on Moscow, and then I kept these as 2 points because it was happening at the same time. It then appeared that the siege of Moscow was starting to happen as the Wagner group had moved from Rostov to Voronezh, and then 5 hours later, they had finally started to reach the outskirts of Moscow. It did seem that the siege of Moscow was starting to occur, and me and several other people were starting to look on with great interest if a group could actually coup and take over the Russian capital. However, what happened then was never mind. And that's how I wrote it, never mind. Very abruptly, basically out of nowhere, just absolutely out of nowhere, the Belarusian president, that idiot whose name I refuse to remember, basically said, he came out and he said, I had peace talks, we made peace. Prigozhin is no longer doing stuff. And I, like many other people, thought that it was completely fake. The Russian state news announced it, and I thought, once again, this has to be fake. This has to be propaganda. They have to be trying to mess with the Wagner group to get them to turn down, right? Because why would you think anything else? Except then what happened was Prigozhin then posted on Telegram, he posted a voice recording of himself saying that while he didn't agree 100% that a deal had been struck so far, he did agree that he wanted to de-escalate, that, you know, he did think that things were not exactly going poorly, let's say, in the peace talks, that he was going to stand down, he didn't want Russian blood, blah, 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 blah. Later on, after he stood down and told all his coup members to stand down, he then said that he would be, and I kid you not, this is actually what happened. This sounds really dumb. I agree. He then said that he was going to move to Belarus. The Wagner group would join the Russian army properly and no longer be under his control, and everyone was going to be forgiven and have amnesty. And that's it. That's how it ended. No, I'm not joking. No one really understands what was happening. I still don't understand what was happening. Putin does not come out of this looking good. Prigozhin comes out of this looking like a dude who's about to be murdered by Putin because he's now giving up his army and moving to Belarus. So I'm not entirely sure what just happened here. And I don't think anyone will really know for sure what just happened here. My takeaway is that for some reason, and this is what we'll never know, for some reason he appears to have been trying a coup. Did he not trust the generals? Did he lose his faith in Putin? Does he not believe in the war anymore? It could be any of these. He has been harshly critical of the Russian command, harshly critical of the war, and with his Wagner group seeing such heavy fighting, he has suffered many losses from it that I suspect have kind of made him very, very, very upset. So he does appear to have been expecting and planning for a coup that the plans of which weren't entirely used, but the general idea of the rush on Moscow, taking Rostov and rushing on Moscow, this appears to have been nicely. He took Rostov without a shot. He met no opposition from basically anybody other than Putin's emergency defense force. So it does appear to have been somewhat planned. The U.S. intelligence have talked about it a little bit, not enough to really go on, but they seem, at least in my opinion, to have been aware that a coup was in the works, so to speak. Not that they were helping it, but that the general idea of a coup happening was something that they were aware of. Okay? And that's about it. That's about all I can say, really, is that the Russian intelligence saw a coup was happening. They tried to defang it. They tried to disband the Wagner group. Now that is what Prigozhin says, and that seems to be what everyone understands. The Ministry of Defense was trying to disband the Wagner group, probably because they realized they were going to start a coup, and they were trying to do it politically and diplomatically to defang them, to disband them. And I'm assuming that they were hoping that they could do this quietly. And then Prigozhin did not do that. He did not go quietly and instead ran on Moscow. Now, Putin is afraid, or something. But the second he stood down his forces, he seems to have lost all leverage on Putin. So it's unknown what will happen from this, because the threat of removing Putin was a real one. Now that he is going to lose his army and move to Belarus, the threat seems to be that he doesn't have a threat anymore. So what happens after this? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. I definitely don't know. But there you go. There's my take on the timeline of events and my take on what happened. The biggest mysteries, of course, are why was he attempting a coup? We do know, again, I'm going to reiterate on this really hard. We do know he was definitely going to attempt a coup. And we do know that that's kind of what kickstarted this whole situation, okay? And we definitely still do know that he's seemingly disbanding himself to move to Belarus. Why? I don't know. That's the second mystery. Why was he so adamant that he needed to take down Putin? And why is he so adamant now that he doesn't need to take down Putin? It's a mystery that, once again, I doubt we'll ever understand. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.